Welcome to My Morning Cup, a podcast produced by Costa Media Advisors and brought to you by the generous support of the Tennessee Valley Authority. To learn more about TVA's impact on our community, follow TVA on Instagram at TVA and on Twitter X at TVA News. My Morning Cup, where we have interesting conversations with genuine people. I'm Mike Costa, your host. My guest this week is David Wade. David is the CEO of EPB, which may be the most proactive utility in the country, bringing the first community-wide gig-speed internet to Chattanooga and establishing the city's reputation as a tech-friendly place to launch a business. David, before we trace your rise at EPB from line helper to CEO, let me ask, what's in your morning cup?
Yeah, my morning cup is just black coffee, and it's actually morning and all day.
Yeah, all day? How many cups do you go through a day?
Several.
Yeah, you caffeinated guy?
Caffeinated.
Yeah, just
high energy.
Hot and black.
Hot and black and high energy.
Yeah. What time you get up in the morning?
Usually around 4:30 or 5.
Oh, wow. So you do go all day. So you grew up in East Ridge?
I grew up in East Ridge.
Yeah, talk a little bit about that. About your parents, what your folks did. Do you have any siblings?
Yeah, I've got a brother and a sister. My mom was a loan officer at a bank, and my father was a painting contractor. So when we grew up, I can remember from probably 9 or 10 years old, spending my summers going to work with Dad and helping wherever I could there. So I started getting used to getting up all summer early on in life.
That's such a strong influence at that young age to be out with your dad when he's working like that. What kind of effect did that have on you?
Yeah, I think it was, and I think if I look back, it was a great effect. At the time, sometimes I probably would have much rather stayed in the bed or went to play with the kids as opposed to going to work with Dad. But it really did set a tone for my entire career by doing that.
Yeah, good bonding with your dad too, wasn't it?
It was absolutely great. Learned so much during that time, that younger time when I was growing up, and did that probably till I was 15 or 16.
So that was kind of like your summer job then when you were in your teenage years?
Yeah, well, early teen years anyhow. As I moved to getting 15, 16, I worked at Shoney's for a little while, and probably one of the best jobs I ever had is I was a lifeguard at the East Ridge Youth Foundation pool for a few years.
That's a pretty good gig.
It was a good gig for somebody that's a junior and senior in high school.
Yeah, I bet. Did you play sports too?
I didn't play a lot of sports. I played in the band. I played the drums.
Did you? You still play drums?
I do, but not very often anymore.
You have a drum kit at home?
I do.
Yeah. What's your favorite thing to play?
Just more of the old rock.
Yeah. Any particular song your favorite drum song?
I still like a lot of them, I guess. Anything that's the Allman Brothers, Doobie Brothers, some of the AC/DC, some of the old school Southern rock.
Good classic rock.
Yeah, that's it.
I just have in my mind that every drummer loves playing Wipeout.
Yeah, not really.
I guess people like to hear it more than drummers like to play
that's
it.
Right.
Huh? So growing up in East Ridge, I imagine small, tight-knit community at that time in particular?
Yeah, it was just a small community. We did whatever small community would do. We would go to school or go to work, and parents would go to work and come home and just play t-ball and softball and baseball while I was growing up, and just pretty much the typical life back then.
Yeah. So when you're in high school and you're thinking about going to college, what were your thoughts there? Because you started out at UTC, is that correct?
I did. I went to UTC for a semester straight out of high school. Unfortunately, that was one of those life lessons. You actually have to show up to classes to stay engaged long and to pass. So my college career only lasted a short semester
I think a lot of us learn those lessons early on when you get that first taste of freedom and you're sleeping and you go, I really could probably miss that 7:50 a.m. class this morning.
And then reality hits you in the face because, now I got to do something different.
So what did you do?
So when I left UTC, I immediately went back to work with Dad, and then I started going to school at night at Chattanooga State at the TCAT class in industrial electricity. So I was working with Dad, painting and stuff during the day, and then going to school at night, industrial electricity class.
Did you have any desire to take up your dad's profession, maybe take over his contracting business?
I had no desire to do that. I had, from being around it my whole life and spending all my summers there, that was not, and I was ready to move on beyond that. But it was a great experience. I just had no desire for that to be
you had enough
a career
of that.
path. Yes.
What was the most tedious part of painting for you?
I think actually I got where I was pretty good at cutting in and, the edges and stuff, but just the fact of having to be focused all the time.
Yeah.
So if you're doing something that's big, like you're rolling or spraying something, okay, it's one thing, but when you get down to really looking at how do you draw a line between baseboard or ceilings and stuff, you can't lose focus. So it was one of those things you had to be focused, I think.
Yeah, that's a great lesson at a young age, too, to be able to understand that if you lose focus, you lose the detail and you make mistakes. And I'm sure that translates over to today with what you do.
Yeah, everything. Focus ends up being a big part of what happens on every day. Even when you're looking at things from a broader perspective, as my role is today, you have to stay focused enough not to miss and not to fall off track.
Yeah. And so you decide to go to TCAT in engineering. Talk a little bit about that transition.
Well, I started going over there to industrial electricity class at night, and it was a great experience. I really started liking the whole learning about electricity and learning how it worked and learning how to build stuff and troubleshoot things. One of the things I remember most about that particular time in that class was the instructor was a gentleman named Larry Dillard, and it was a self-paced class. So, you would go through a certain syllabus and do stuff, and when you got ready to take a test or it had a hands-on component, you got ready to have him come look at something that you had built or troubleshoot something, you would go get Larry, and he always would say, he that thinketh he stand, take heed lest he fall. And, as somebody, as an 18-year-old, I didn't really resonate a lot what he was saying at that point in time. Yeah. But it's been something that stuck with me through life that he said that because really what he kept telling me and kept saying over and over to all of us is be careful when you think you know it all, because you really probably don't.
Yeah.
And that's just resonated with me from that early time in that class when he said that just saying, be careful when you think you've got it figured out.
That's great advice, and particularly with electricity, because electricity scares me to death, and I really don't know how you do it, but to tell you, don't think you know it all, because electricity could jump up and get you.
Yeah, it was just perfect advice, just to quote the, be careful, let he that thinketh he stand take heed lest he fall. I thought, boy, what a life lesson that has carried with me from when I was 18 years old till now.
Applies to everything, doesn't it?
Yeah, it certainly does.
So you graduate from TCAT, got your degree. What did you do next?
I went to work at Mississippi Valley Steel as a maintenance electrician.
And was that here in Chattanooga?
Here in town, right off of Dodge Avenue. And I was working there as a maintenance electrician. It was a great job in a lot of ways. I enjoyed what I was doing. I enjoyed the people I was working with. I got to have a tremendous job. I started a family and had 2 young boys then. One of the things that I distinctly remember about working at the steel plant was another one of those lessons in that I hadn't been there long and there was a crane that tore up. It was probably the first time I'd went on a job by myself. That most time I'd been early on, I was going with another electrician or another mechanic or somebody to the jobs. And so nobody else was there. So I went up there and I asked the crane operator, what's it doing? And he told me the fuse was blown. And I said, well, what's it doing? He said, it's not doing nothing. The fuse is blown. And so I get my meter out and I test, and it doesn't look like the fuse is blown according to what I knew. And so I go over and open the control cabinet and I start checking stuff. And he said, he came over and he said, I'll try and tell you how to do your job, but this happens pretty routinely. They come over and put another fuse in it and it works. Mm-hmm. I said, well, I tested the fuse and it's good. And so I was troubleshooting, and then all of a sudden one of my coworkers comes up and he says, you having trouble with this one? I said, no, I hadn't figured it out yet, but I will. And he said, did you replace the fuses? I said, no, but I tested them. He said, well, let me throw a fuse in just to make sure. And he did, and guess what? It worked, right? And, another one of those lessons that probably was related to that first lesson about let he that thinketh he stand take heed, because, I learned 2 things that day, right? I learned one thing was about the thermal characteristics of fuses that I didn't know, but probably the bigger thing I learned is, boy, you can learn stuff from everybody.
Yeah. But I can see your point of you've got to go through your system in terms of your checks to make sure that things don't assume that the fuse blown.
Yeah. But also don't, be careful so you listen learn from everybody, right?
How old were you at that time?
I was probably 22 or 21, 22 years old.
And how old was the crane operator?
Much older than I was, and a lot wiser.
Yeah, like, look, buddy, you can take it apart, but it's a fuse. Let's put a new fuse in.
Yeah, we laughed about that, and he gave me grief about it for a while.
That's part of the initiation.
That's right.
I'm sure. How long were you at Mississippi Valley Steel?
I think I was there about 4 years.
Yeah. And you had mentioned that they had gone on strike?
Yeah, when right before I left Mississippi Valley Steel, what actually caused me to look is they went on strike. And so, I had a wife and 2 young kids, and so I started putting my application in other places. Mm-hmm. Well, at the time, we didn't know how long a strike would last. And, when you have a wife and 2 young boys and no savings, that's not a good place to be with when your income stops. And one of the places I put an application in was EPB. Mm-hmm. And luckily the strike only lasted a couple of days and we were back to work. Oh. But then a few weeks later, I get a call from EPB and I come down and talk to EPB and they offer me a job, but they didn't offer me a job as an electrician. They offered me a job as a line helper, as a groundman in a line crew.
So what's a line helper do?
It's just really that. It's a helper. It does all the stuff that on the ground to help a lineman do their job.
So a lineman's up in the air and he says,
I need a cross arm, then you get him a cross arm. Or if you go there and you have to dig a hole for a pole, you dig the hole for a pole and you set poles and, do anything that can be done on the ground to help the skilled lineman, right? And I went there with taking that job as it was a cut and pay to take that job because I was moving from electrician to a groundman.
Well, I was going to ask you, was that kind of a step back for you?
It was definitely a step back, and it was a step back, but it came with a couple of things. One is it came with what I thought was going to be job security, right? Because I just experienced going on a strike. So that was, kind of unraveling. So having security meant something. But more than that, it became what I thought was a career decision, because I would start as a line helper, but then was assuming I would start the apprentice program to be a lineman within a couple of years, and then I would go through the 4-year apprentice program. I fully expected to be a lineman in 6 years and to retire from EPB as a lineman or a foreman or a troubleshooter doing line work. And things didn't quite work out that way.
No, they didn't, did they?
They, from some good, some not. The first thing is they froze the apprentice program. So instead of starting the apprentice program in 2 years, I was a groundman for 8 years.
Oh, wow.
So I dug a lot of holes.
At that point, was there a point in those 8 years that you said, wow, I came here thinking I would have this progression and then froze it. What have I done?
Those thoughts, in a way, they did cross my mind, and I was frustrated that they weren't moving as fast. It wasn't that the promise of being able to go there ever really went away. It just got delayed. Right. So there was still, and it kept getting delayed, a shorter piece at a time, a year or two at a time. Yeah. And then I finally did get a chance to start the apprentice program and learn how to climb poles and loved doing that. I actually enjoyed working as a groundman, and it was, while I did take a cut in pay in actual dollars, I was able to, when I got there, found out I got a lot more opportunities to work overtime and some stuff too. Yeah. So that was helpful. But, when I started the apprentice program as a lineman, I really enjoyed doing that. And one of the things that I found by doing that is by getting a chance to work on the ground for multiple years, I really got a chance to see what a successful apprentice would look like. Yeah. Right. And one of the things that I figured out pretty quick is I could watch around, and there were a couple of different types of folks that would enter the apprentice program, right? It would be folks that would be the first one out of the truck, the first one up the pole. And it'd be the folks that would look around the corner to see if they could get out of climbing a pole. Yeah. And then probably in between too, right? Yeah. And I figured out real quick, the ones that really had it easier were always the ones that were the first one up the pole.
Why is that?
Because the lineman took care of them. Right. And in that case, it really was that is, he says, if you ended up being one of the ones that laid back, the lineman would call on you. Yeah. And they would push you harder. Yeah. And for your own benefit, they didn't really want you laid back, right? Yeah. If you were the one that was leaning in and up front, they would teach you more, it'd help you more, and and then you may climb 3 or 4 poles, and they say, well, we'll get the next 1 or 2. But if you were laying back, no way they'd do that. Right? Yeah. So you found out real quick, being the first one out of the truck and up the pole was a good place to be.
And isn't that usually in circumstances? I mean, most times when people think of linemen climbing poles, it's after a storm or something like that. But I'm sure there's also every routine days that you've just got to go out and repair something too.
Well, today we've got, every crew's got multiple bucket trucks, and there's some places where we don't have access to get a bucket truck in, so they do still climb. When I came to work at EPB in 1983, we still had crews that didn't have bucket trucks at all. Really? So everything you did, whether it was on the road or not, you climbed a pole for.
So that's putting on those spikes and going in.
It's putting on the spikes and the hooks and climbing up the pole.
Do heights bother you?
Heights have never bothered me, and I think part of that went back to working with my father in my younger years, because I was always around ladders and climbing ladders and working off of scaffolding and stuff like that at that point in time.
Man, you got no fear of two things I fear: heights and electricity. I would not be good at that.
Yeah. Well, it's you have to have respect, but not necessarily fear, right?
Yeah. Well, that's a great way to put it. So you're a lineman's helper for 8 years, and you go through the apprentice program. How long are you doing the lineman work?
Well, I actually do not make it through the apprentice program.
Okay.
The apprentice program is a 4-year program. So I'm right about 3 months into my 4th year. So I've just started my last year of the apprentice program. And I got approached about moving to engineering. You know, they were looking for someone that had been doing the work to actually design the work they'd been doing, because it's kind of smart to connect those two together, that, you know, to make sure you're thinking about what it takes to build something when you're actually drawing it on a piece of paper.
You got that practical knowledge of actually doing it.
And so I got approached about moving to engineering and taking a job as a designer in that group. Probably the toughest career decision I ever made. Yeah. And it was tough because it was the timing of it, right? Because if they'd asked me a year later and I'd already topped out as a lineman, it would have been an easy decision. I would have said yes, and it would have been an easy decision. This meant I had to stop what I had intended to do right when the finish line
it was right in your grasp.
Right? And I had to stop to choose another path. And that was a tough decision.
How did you evaluate that and eventually decide to take that opportunity?
You know, I don't think there was anything magic about the evaluation. It was really just looking at, you know, both opportunities. You know, I loved what I was doing, and so I wasn't, and I think retiring as a lineman or foreman would have been great too. But, you know, I liked the thoughts of getting to have input on how things were designed and how they were built and stuff. And I thought that my experience doing that would be helpful. And, you know, so I ended up deciding to move to engineering and making that decision, you know, and then I went back to school again at night.
Yeah, and talk about that a little bit. You went back and you started at Chat State?
I went back and started at Chat State, and, you know, then graduated there with a 2-year degree, and then moved to UTC and graduated with a engineering degree. Took a long time going at night, I think.
So you're working during the day.
Working during the day and going at night.
Couple hours, 3 hours at night?
Yeah, a few hours every night. Usually I can remember a lot of times I would take 2, 3 or 4 hour classes, and, you know, and then it'd feel like I'm not getting anywhere. So I'd think, well, I'm going to see if I can take 3, and then it'd wear me out. So I'd back down to 1 or 2, you know. And so it was just that whole cycle of, well, I'm not moving fast enough, because, you know, going at night took forever. Most people take that long to go to school. They call doctors, but not me. It just took me that long. So
well, you had small kids at that time too.
I had two young boys, and so it was quite the juggle, and had tremendous support from my wife Sherry.
I bet.
Who took care of a lot of the stuff at home, so I could go back to school and do those things.
Yeah. So Chat State and then UTC, and you got out with your BS in engineering management at UTC?
I did.
How long did all that take you?
Let's see, I haven't looked like. I would bet it was probably 10 years.
Really?
Yeah. So actually, I didn't graduate with my BS in engineering until 2004. So I was in my 40s when I graduated there. I can remember one time I went to a class, and I walked in the class, and the class was all up and talking like a class with a lot of noise. And I walked in the door, and they all went and got in their seats, you know, thinking I was the professor. And so I went and sat in one of the seats, and they started back talking again. So
I love that.
I was kind of a different place than most of the folks.
But I mean, 10 years is a long time, just in anyone's life. What was driving you? What did you feel that you had to get that degree, or did you just want to do it for yourself? I'm just trying to see what motivated you.
I didn't have to get it.
Yeah.
There was no, when I moved to engineering, there was no real requirement I even went back to school. I knew it would create other opportunities by doing that. And so I don't think there was any, I have to do this feeling. It was more of something that I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And then I really did enjoy learning about how things operated and stuff.
Yeah. So you get out of UTC, you're in your job. What happens next for you?
Well, even while I'm going to school, I changed jobs quite a bit because I've worked, I was in the engineering design group for quite a while. Then I had a chance to move back into the construction side, scheduling and supervising and managing the work that in the operations side. So I was doing those while I was going to school at night, and had a chance at one time to manage a process improvement department, which was really interested looking at how we can take things across the company and can we make them better. Mm-hmm. And then I had an opportunity to move into the vice president of engineering and construction.
So you really learned all this from the ground up, literally.
Literally, I started there digging holes and dug holes. And, I tell folks, I started my career digging out holes. I'm ending it digging out of holes. Just different holes, right?
That's a great.
Still digging.
Great way to put it. And in talking to you about this and seeing your path, there's really not a better path for someone in the position you're in than to start the way you did and learn each and every job along the way.
I think it has been, it's fantastic to have the experience that I've had throughout the organization. And I think really the thing that's been invaluable about it is you really learn how important each and every job is. I think that's the most valuable thing out of doing the career path that I've had is I don't take for granted how important every single job is. I know how important every single job is.
That's such a great point. And you probably know this, that a lot of jobs get discounted from people who have not done them.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're looking, we could probably do without that or that. But because you've got that experience, that's an important link in that chain.
Yeah, it is. It is the experience of getting to interact, throughout the organization is just tremendous because you realize just every single job, how important it is and how important that the relationships of those jobs to each other work. Now, I can remember when I was in the process improvement group, I got a chance to work with the folks that were doing our very first cultural assessment. And one of the roles I had was to take the consultants around every department and introduce them to the department manager. And the one thing that became kind of comical after time is every one of these meetings went like this. We're this department and we're the backbone of EPB. And, so we would talk in the morning. I'd say, well, we're going to see the backbone of EPB today. And the next day we'd say, well, we're going to see the backbone of EPB today. And the thing that you realize about that, it's comical in a way. In a way, they are right. In a way, they're wrong, right? Because in a way, it really is true that every single one of them was immensely important and had tremendous value. Mm-hmm. Now, they weren't all the same thing. We would have been some weird creature if we didn't have a heart and a head and arms and legs. But it was really just to even have that experience of getting, even the ones I didn't work in, to really get to be part of those was tremendous.
Well, and the fact that each department considered themselves the backbone. It shows you the pride they took in what they did.
They did. It was very, very cool to be a part of those.
Yeah. I want to get to how progressive, particularly EPB's been, and you've been a big force behind that. So you did you got promoted to vice president of engineering. At what point in that? Let me back up. I moved here in 2000, and it wasn't really until 2004 that fiber started.
We rolled out the residential fiber in September of 2009 is when we launched.
2009.
Right. That's when we launched. Prior to that, though, way back in 1999 and 98, we worked to change the state law that would allow us to get in the video and internet business. So things don't happen as fast as you think they do, right? And then the first thing we did was got into the telephone business and started selling business telephone services.
Okay.
And that was back at the time that Bell South was breaking up, and they were bringing a bunch of competitive local exchange carriers, and that's what EPB became. And there was a lot of those that popped up. Mm-hmm. A lot of them didn't survive. And then a few years later, I believe it was 2005, we expanded to offer internet service to the business community. And that really spun out of the mayor at the time was Bob Corker. And he had this vision of using the fiber downtown to help businesses have internet service. And created this vision he referred to as MetroNet. And later came to EPB and asked us if we could take that ideal and run with it.
That's pretty prescient on his part of being able to see the value of providing internet service to businesses.
It certainly was, and he's certainly been the visionary leader of our community for many years.
Yeah. The 1998-99 getting into the phone not internet, but video services. And I'm just going to relate my background to being a broadcaster. I remember that distinctly when EPB was getting into video services because it was a bit of a competition to television stations. That drove a lot of y'all's, I guess, a different portion of your business then. That's, at least in my mind, when EPB became more than just a utility.
Yeah, I think it did. We had spent some time working on changing the culture, but it fundamentally pushed us to think differently. No longer did people have to buy something from us. Mm-hmm. And so, if you're the only reason somebody buys something from us because they have to, then it can become easy to become complacent.
There's a lot of utilities like that.
And it can be real easy to do that. But when you enter into a competitive landscape, then you have to think about what separates you and how do you have that best service. And so it was something that helped us as a company really think about how do we really up our game and serve the community at even higher levels.
In a sense, it really changed your culture.
Yeah, it absolutely did.
Because I think of other utilities I'm familiar with, and you've got to stand out among utilities across the country because so many just rely on that. Well, they got to buy it from us. We're the only ones with it.
Yeah. Well, that may not even always be the case, right? It's certainly not the case with the internet or any of the competitive products we serve. But, it is easy to get looked into that. So we had to work hard to change the culture and to really think about our mission, of making a difference and improving the quality of life in the community.
So you're vice president of engineering really at a critical time in EPB's growth of getting into these new areas.
That was my role at the time, was vice president of engineering and construction. And then right after we moved into the fiber business. So shortly after that, I was promoted to chief operating officer.
Chief operating officer. And if you could take me through, you'd already been laying fiber, but 2008, 2009 was pretty critical. Not just for laying the network, but we went through the Great Recession and there were some funds provided to communities. And my understanding is EPB took advantage of that to lay the fiber out.
Yeah, we were, we started building, and I'll back up just a little bit because, while we were offering internet services to businesses in the mid 2000s, we were looking at a business plan. Could we expand that to doing the whole community and all of our residential customers too? And our first look at that was the technology really wasn't available to do anything different than what was happening with existing providers at the time. And we chose not to just do something that somebody else could do because it didn't seem like it made a fundamental difference in the community. And so we watched the technology and had the GPON technology we became comfortable with it. And so we wrote a business plan to build a fiber network across our entire service territory. We actually wrote 3 business plans. We wrote one that said, if we put this fiber in, what will it do to our electric system? We wrote another that said, what kind of economic benefit will it provide our community? And then we wrote a third one that said, can we sell enough video, voice, and data products to pay for it? And all 3 of them indicated that we should move in that direction. So the board approved us moving in that direction, and we started to go. We'd already borrowed money. We'd already actually been sued 3 times, and won all of those on summary judgment. But we'd already done that. We'd already raised the capital that we needed to do it, and then all of a sudden, at the recession, the Renewal Investment Act came open that said they wanted folks to go in and build a smart grid technology. They wanted folks to look at how they modernize the electric system, which was what we had already had the board approve. So they wanted shovel-ready projects, and our foot was on the shovel. Yeah. And we were digging. And so we were awarded a $111 million grant. We applied and received a $111 million matching grant. And that allowed us to really compress the time and accelerate tremendously what we were doing.
I see that as a seminal event in Chattanooga's particularly business history and where allowing us to be where we are today, to having that done. How far ahead was EPB of its peers of being that ready? Because I just can't imagine that every utility across the country had plans like that they.
No, I think that's exactly why we received the grant, because, they were looking for shovel-ready projects. And, if you look at it we weren't the largest. Their maximum grant was $200 million. And some of the really large, energy companies, like PG&E or Florida Power that are multiples our size, received that much, but on a per capita basis, we were by far the largest award given. And I think it really was because we were prepared in a way that the rest of the industry wasn't.
Right.
Even I can recall before we got the grant, going to conferences and talking to vendors about like automated switches. And they were wanting to put them on radios. And we're saying, well, we want them to put on our fiber. And they would all say, well, why do you want to put them on your fiber? We've got radios. And so we continued to push, and they would look at us like we were crazy thinking about putting the equipment on fiber. And we finally found companies with meters and switches that were willing to embed the fiber technology into their devices. But looking back, yes, the switches did work on radios to a certain extent. One of the simple explanations, if you think about how many times software and firmware upgrades, even for security purposes today, their model was you drive to the location and you hook your laptop to the switch and you upgrade the firmware. Well, we've got 1,200 switches, and we have done thousands of firmware and software and configurations updates over the last 15 years.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine the possibility of keeping that up to date if we're talking about people driving around with laptops.
Yeah.
But we were the one that pushed them to put fiber in the devices that allowed you not to drive around.
This may sound like a stupid question, but it's kind of an organizational question. How does that decision get made so early and so far ahead of your peer? Did you have a group that was looking ahead on that? Did that come under your purview to say, look out and see what we're going to need? Because all of that discussion and planning, you were in the right place, right time because you did all that planning.
Well, we had multiple groups looking at stuff.
Yeah.
We certainly had a group that was focused on writing the business plan, but we also they were working with, folks in the operations and the engineering and other areas to think about, well, what can we do? Because it wasn't like this one group has all the answers. They have to work with the whole organization to say, where are our opportunities at? What can we do if we really automate our electric system? So you have to start with having a group that's writing a business plan, but it really was a much broader effort than a single.
So a lot of collaboration,
group,
a lot of meetings, a lot of discussion.
Discussion with multiple folks.
And on the smart grid, like when we have a storm and power goes out or something happens with power in your neighborhood, my experience, it comes back on sometimes instantaneously. How much is that what the fiber and having the switches there are?
That's right. The thing that really has fundamentally been the backbone of our electric system and is the automation on it. Because what we used to do, if a car hits a pole,
right,
it would operate a switch back at the substation, taking about 1,000 customers out of power. And we would send somebody to the area. They would find where the cars hit the pole. They would radio back in and talk to a dispatcher who would look at maps and tell them to drive to this location and open these switches, drive to this location and close these switches. And that would bring everybody back on, but the people were right around where the actual physical damage was. And what we've done with the automation is really taken that and collapse it from being a couple of hours or so to being a few seconds, because it all happens. The technology really looks and sees where the damage is located, automatically opens and closes switches to route power around the damage, leaving it with just where the damage is out for us to come make the repairs.
So it's all done automatically.
It's all done automatically over the fiber and the automated switches.
No visit in the substation, opening those switches. No visiting the other one, closing those other switches. That makes it much more efficient.
It definitely changes
I want to get back to the internet and the gig and really the difference that's made in Chattanooga. So you spent time and the grant laying fiber, and then we're able to go out and boast that we've got the fastest internet in the country.
We did. Now, we didn't day one we launched, all right? Because actually, I'll tell you, one of the probably strategic blunders we made initially was we initially launched with a 15 meg internet product. And, it was at a time when our competitors were offering 12 meg and 16 meg. And, I guess being engineers, we thought 15 was a rounder number, but and it was at a time where there was a lot of congestion. So if you turned on the internet when you got home from work at 6 or 7 or 8, you didn't really get whatever they were advertising, 12 or 16. So we put in the fiber, and we were telling folks that our 15 was great, that you actually were going to get it all the time, and you get the same upload and download speeds. And, we were seeing, some good success, but all of a sudden just kept resonating with us. why are we beating our heads against the wall to tell folks that our fiber is better when we offer the same speed as everybody else? If we just double everybody's speed and still charge them the same thing, because that's what we're saying. The beauty of the fiber is we've got this capacity.
Mm-hmm.
So we started talking about doubling everybody's speed overnight. And, it didn't come without some apprehension, right? Because, the engineers are saying, well, what if this happens? Well, what if we just double everybody's? Well, maybe we need to do these upgrades before we double everybody's speeds. And there was kind of some apprehension about that, but we made the decision to do that. And overnight we moved everybody from 15 meg to 30 meg. And then we told everybody we'd done it the next day, and nothing broke. So it started building some internal confidence because nothing broke. But it really set us on a path for saying, we're not the same. There's no reason we should act the same and have a 15 meg product. So we just doubled, and that really fundamentally taught us something that led to the gig, I think.
Yeah, and that's a great marketing tool too, or marketing position.
Yeah.
To be able to do that. And getting to the gig and all the branding that came with it. It sounds like a loaded question to you, and I know you know how important it is, but how can you verbalize how important the gig and what you provide internet-wise is done for the entrepreneurial culture here in Chattanooga?
I think it has made a tremendous difference. I mean, we've had economic studies do look-back studies and say, what kind of impact has this investment made on the community? And the latest study was, that it over 10 years made $2.7 billion worth of community impact. So we've tried to look and quantify that through economic studies.
Mm-hmm.
But what's sometimes more impactful is to be in the room. And I can remember being in a reception one night, and a couple of gentlemen came up to me and introduced themselves and told me they were with a maritime company that had located in Chattanooga because of our internet, because of EPB. And I thought, that's weird. How is a maritime company locating in Chattanooga because of our internet?
We don't have an ocean.
Yeah. And what this company did is they assimilate lots of precise geospatial data, and they send it real time to ships at seas of what's going on all across the globe. And they needed fast internet to be able to do that. And they moved from Miami to Chattanooga. They started off their business, I guess, in their business idea in Miami, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. And they moved to Chattanooga. And I've heard many of those stories.
That's got to be pretty heartening for you.
Yeah, it is very heartening to hear those kind of stories.
So the next iteration of this, which I still don't understand, is quantum. Can you explain it to me like I'm 5 years old?
I think the way I tend to think about the quantum is comparing it to the difference between the mainframe computers and where we are today. It's really that paradigm type of a shift. It's a different technology that's going to open doors where we can do stuff that we can't think about doing today. We tend to convince ourselves that we have all the computer power we need to do what we do today, but that's just not the case. The one example of that is we all use our GPSs, but if we had a conference at the convention center and had 1,000, 2,000 people put in their GPS, we're all going out to Hamilton Place, it would create a traffic jam on the ridge cut because it would send them all that way. And that's because it doesn't have the resources to be able to predict where you're going to be and where everybody's going to be. It don't even try to do that. But with the advances of quantum technology, it's a promise of us being able to do that and route of different directions because we know we're sending too many people in here, not wait till we create a traffic jam and route around it.
So it's more proactive in using your example that not until all those people get on the ridge cut does it say, here's alternative routes because this one's backed up.
Because it doesn't even have the computer resources to try to project what's going to happen.
Well, and I think your point earlier of we tend to think that we have all the computer technology that we need is important, because we do until you see what's offered.
Until you see what's next.
What's available there.
But we probably always, a lot of times, have thought that, right? At every stage that we had what we needed, right? Because it's hard to vision what you don't have. And I think that's what the quantum space will do, is give us what we don't have. And it's also we're in a race against other countries, because there is they even refer to it in, where it is Q Day, is a time where quantum technology is able to break encryption of today's stuff. And every time you look at a study, that time gets shorter and shorter. So we have to have new ways to secure our technology. We have to have new ways to do it. And we have to be the ones that get there before other countries.
Well, and what kind of advantage does that give our city?
Well, if I think about lots of things, everything comes back to, are you prepared? We got the grant because we were ready. Volkswagen is not here because they knocked on our doors and we went out and created a mega site once they knocked on the doors. We had visionary leadership in our community that went out and said, we need this much land, and cleaned up the land. If I remember right, this was something that Mayor Ramsey and others were working on 14, 15 years before Volkswagen landed. So being prepared for opportunity creates the opportunity. You're not guaranteed an opportunity, but I can tell you this, if you're not prepared, you're pretty much not going to get the opportunity.
Yeah.
If you look at Huntsville's median income is about the same size city, but their median income is much greater than Chattanooga's. It's because they were prepared for the race when the space race started.
Yeah.
So I think that's the way I'll think about this quantum, is we're really preparing our community for what's next and to be part of that economic prosperity of what comes next.
And to just dovetail off of that, EPB is a great community partner. Not why, but you guys are involved in so many different things. How important is it for EPB and for you, David Wade, to be involved in the community?
Our mission is to improve the quality of life in the community. And I think we really believe in that mission. Our mission's not about creating kilowatt hours or providing electricity or community. Our mission's to make a difference in the community. And that's something that our entire organization really stands behind and believes in. And it's something that means something to our company, that we are in a place where we can make a difference.
And you guys are making a difference. Before I get to my last question, David, I do need to remind our listeners who makes all of this possible. And it's thank you to the Tennessee Valley Authority for sponsoring My Morning Cup. Follow TVA on social media to learn more about its multifaceted mission of service. And visit TVA.com/do good here to explore exciting TVA career opportunities. This is my standard last question, and I'm going to hit you with it. What would you tell that 25-year-old David Wade is important for a happy life?
Find something that you love to do. I think that really is, I see folks sometimes chasing something that's not them, and that's not what makes happiness. Is find some way to do stuff that you love. Find some way to give back. Find some way to make a difference. And to me, that's what can make a pretty happy life.
Well, again, an important point of so many people are chasing the dollar that they're doing stuff they don't love every day.
That's right.
And the giving back, I think, is important. And I think EPB is a good example of that. And there's a lot of people like yourself in town who are doing a lot to give back.
Well, we have a mission that our founders set up, was positioned EPB to be in a great place, because it it put a mission for EPB of making a difference, but it set it up to where it's not necessarily disrupted by 4-year election cycles swinging either. So it's operated with the same mission of service, but it's able to ride through some of the election cycles challenges.
Particularly today when everything's so political, that's a good thing that you don't have to deal with that.
Yeah, well, everything is about our community for us. It really is about what do we need to do to make our community better.
Well, you're making it better, and I appreciate you coming in and talking to us about it.
Well, thank you.
Thanks for listening to My Morning Cup, a podcast by Consta Media Advisors. If you liked this episode, please share it with a friend. I release a new episode each week, so be sure to subscribe on Spotify, Apple, Google, or wherever you listen to podcasts.